Welcome in, everybody. It's Brett here. And today we have a very special guest. I'm very excited about this. We are chatting with Melissa Rivers about her book, Lies My Mother Told Me, Tall Tales from a Short Woman. And I love the tag here, warning a work of nonfiction. And then, of course, she has a great podcast, group text. Thank you so much for your time. It's great to
Thank you.
meet you.
But the word non is crossed out.
Yes, yes.
We have to be very, very accurate about that.
Yes. Well, it's a fantastic book, and I had the opportunity to read it, and I'm very excited to chat about it. And I like that we do need to make that clear that the word non is crossed out.
Because if it was nonfiction, I would be in a straitjacket.
I love it. Yeah, you people might come after you a little bit and say
Well,
what.
people keep asking me if it's a memoir. I'm like, no. This was too much time on my hands during COVID, and my writing partner and I got silly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll to be honest, I mean, it could go either direction. I mean, if we're being honest here, but yeah, so this was a great project born out of a crazy time for a lot of people. Um, and I feel like, you obviously had the podcast prior to this, of
Yes.
course. So I think it's important that we know that. But a lot of podcasts came out of this time, but also a lot of great books. And of course, this is definitely one of them. And if there was sort of like an overarching theme that you wanted readers to take away from it, is there one in particular, or do you just want people to simply be entertained and reminded really just of an iconic person that your mother was, and sort of just be able to have a good laugh?
I think you hit it, which is the overarching theme was to have a good laugh. We laughed while writing it, and the most you can hope for, the best you can hope for, is that other people are going to laugh. And it's strictly a funny book, and you can pick it up and put it down. There is no plot you need to follow. It's literally just, you need a laugh, pick it up, read one of the, that's all sort of short story form. I think the longest one is like 6 pages, and just have a good giggle, because that's what we all need. And especially when we were writing it, we were just like, oh dear God, we need to laugh. So we just started writing. It started because everybody kept saying, what would my mother be saying right now? And it started out as kind of an article addressing that. And then we were like, well, what would she say about other things? And it just sort of snowballed and got sillier and sillier. And I started saying, well, how would she have told me how the earth was made? And we're like, okay, I wrote that one first and sent it to my writing partner. And I'm like, do you think anything's here? And he's like, oh, let's go. Let's just go and see how far we can push it and then pull back. And this was the pulled back version.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the things, Melissa, that I find fascinating about the book is, like, I think a lot of people would want to know, what would your mother have to say about lockdown? And I'm certain, I mean, an entire comedy special probably could have been written because of it. And it has happened with other comics, obviously. But one of the things that I found fascinating also about the book is that although it is a pulled back version, like you said, it's really just kind of honest and transparent. And it's really just quite funny. Like, I think, with a lot of things that could come out of somebody's time in the last couple years, um, I'm not here to at anybody necessarily, especially during the age of social media and how fast things can go viral. But you know what I mean, though? It's a really good book. And my
Hey,
hat's off to you and your team because it's really smart and funny. And reading it, I'm 48, so I was, very familiar with who your mother was, especially during the generation of her stand up and just sort of her
Right.
iconic career. And even seeing her live at one point, I think early in my late 20s, it's just good. So congratulations on
Thank
it.
you.
And I think people really are going to appreciate it if they haven't had a chance to read it yet.
It's just fun. It's just funny. It's easy. It's an easy, fun read, and that's what we're striving for. And we think we did it.
Yeah, well, I would say you hit the nail on the head for sure. Again, when you're creating something like this, I'm very curious. I want to kind of keep on the same topic, but sort of switch a little bit to the creator side of you. Uh, is it? I mean, how do you go about this and decide what you're gonna do or not do? Because I mean, I've seen some of your interviews where you've talked about this and just other things, and there really is sort of a limitless catalog of things that you could discuss, and you've had to narrow this down to like a book form. You could do an extended version, really, honestly.
Yes. Yes. The creative process and figuring out what was going to go in the book, or just the creative process in general.
Just in general, I think people would find that fascinating.
Again, I have a wonderful, not ghostwriter, collaborator. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, can we please put your name on the cover too? He's like, nah. He's like, no. So he's always the first person I always thank. And I'm very open about that. I have the world's best writing partner. And I think we're a good team because this is the funniest part. He was also one of my mom's writing partners.
Okay.
And then we started sharing him, and then it became kind of like a turf war. So it's
Oh, I love
it
it.
always got a little complicated there. But writing the first book we did together, which was Book of Joan, right after my mom passed, saved us both because
Yeah.
it allowed us a place to laugh. And I'm very lucky that we have the same sense of humor. So we start things and they don't always pan out. So right now we have 3 different ideas. We're both thinking about them. We're both kind of messing with them. And we'll see which one we feel like we can do the most with. And that's always, you think, like, originally the book was the history of the world as
Yeah.
told by my mother. Well, we got stuck with Napoleon on Waterloo, and there was no Starbucks, and it was like and we didn't know where to go from there. Like, we started feeling like there's only so many wars we can write about, so we started getting a little stuck. We did have a brilliant chapter, however, on the Inquisition. I will leave that out there.
I
So,
love it.
yeah, we see where things sort of start and stop. And once we hit on something that works for us, we're like, well, let's just keep going and going and going and going and see if we can even make a list of enough things that would be there that we could write on.
Sure.
And then we sell it. And then once it's sold, then we actually start the writing process. But we'll always do 2 or 3 chapters just to see if we're getting repetitive, if there's enough. And then, very often we'll pivot, or things will just become an article somewhere, or things will just get put in a drawer. And I do a lot of that also when I'm developing TV show ideas and creative ideas. Sometimes, I just pulled one out of a drawer that everybody passed on for 3.5 years. And now everyone's like, that's a great idea. And
Interesting.
it just was, sometimes the timing has to be right.
Yeah. So I love that because it makes me think of another question, similarly related to the book, but just really as someone who creates content like yourself. You've created a podcast, you've written several books. I feel like there's an argument to be made. You said something interesting about, you have these ideas that you pull out and people pass on them, pass on them, pass on them. And then now all of a sudden it becomes, oh, wow, you're like the smartest human being on the planet. Why did we not think of this before? So there is an argument to be made. Would you say that if you are a content creator, with especially now with all the bajillion ways to create something and to put something out there, there really probably is no excuse, right, to not create if you're a content creator. Would you say that to be true? Does that question make sense? Because I
It
think,
does make sense, but people do hit dry spells.
sure, of course.
In writing the last book, Larry, my partner, and I both got really bad writer's block. Unfortunately, we did not get it at the same time.
I know, that's good.
Which
That's
was
not a
a
good
big
sign.
problem because you had two. As soon as he was like, "Okay, I'm out of it," I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm going in." So that's a lot of pressure they're constantly creating. But what it is sometimes ideas aren't right at the moment, or something hits you and you present it differently. I have two shows that nobody wanted that now everybody's asking to see. And for one of them's been sitting on one of them we've been trying to get done for about 2.5 years. And finally we're all just like, screw it. We'll put it away. And I mentioned it in a meeting and they're like, we have to see it right away. But you want to say, it's been out there, but that's what happens. So it's like, never give up on an idea. But sometimes you have to like walk away from it. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I can tweak it and it feels fresh again. And that might be the right time for it.
I love it. Well, let's talk
Does that
about
make sense?
it. Does, yeah. And I think, especially to some who might not necessarily have the platform, that doesn't always guarantee anything per se, just based on what you just said. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like it shouldn't stop you from creating. And I think,
for example, a friend of mine who's a very well-known songwriter and musician sent me a song. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It's like, yeah, he mentioned, I can't say it, the band that recorded it for their new album now. He wrote it 12 years ago.
oh, wow.
And he's like, can you believe? He goes, you remember this? I'm like, yeah, it was always really good. He goes, yeah, just got recorded. And you're like, Jesus, you wrote that 12 years ago.
Wow. Wow. I really appreciate your honesty and candor, which is no surprise because, having seen you sort of be a part of this world of entertainment, and in the public eye for so long. Let's talk about your podcast, Group Text. I've just listened to a couple episodes. I have to say, out of the several that I listened to, you discussing the Johnny Depp trial was probably one of my favorites. Yeah, so how did that sort of come about for you creating a podcast and going that route with a lot of what you've already done in the past, whether it be on television or whatever, and sort of taking it into a different medium of just audio?
I did a bunch of people's podcasts and I'm like, God, this is fun.
That's
This is
cool.
awesome. I can go to work and not have to be in hair and makeup. This is the best.
I love
and it gave me an opportunity to talk about things that I'm interested in. I'm always interested in like new upcoming talent because I always think they have really interesting stories.
Yeah.
I always like talking to obviously established people because there's always questions that I want to know that aren't usually asked.
Sure.
And just topics I want to talk about, things that I'm interested in. And I think, I'm not so high-minded that I don't read TMZ. You know what I mean? I'm not one of those people who, I have a really good education. I read, really serious nonfiction books, but I'm happiest in the shallow end of the pool.
Yeah.
And, I think most people are.
Of course, because I think it's relatable to people.
Right. I mean, you can be super smart, and every super smart person I knew, we were still talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, I'm so comfortable talking about stuff, and I don't feel like it makes me any less intelligent or anything like that. It's what we all want to talk about. But that's why Fashion Police did so well.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about what everybody was saying at home.
Yeah.
And anyone who says, ooh, I want to say, show me one person who sits at home with their friends and says everyone looks amazing. I'll show you a liar.
Yeah.
You know? And so it was the same kind of mentality of we're talking about or talking to people that everybody's talking about.
Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, we're getting ready to talk to Kato Kalin here in a couple
By the
days.
way, one of the nicest people you will ever meet.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I met him.
Yeah, he's was just on my friend's show, which I would recommend you doing. Classic Conversations. He's had some amazing people on his show, and he just had Kato, and we were able to get him here in a couple weeks. Um, just as
Funny, nice,
Yeah, and as a
gets it.
sidebar, I asked, I go, is there anything that he does not want to talk about? And they're like, actually, he loves to talk about OJ and being a house guest. And it's not because it's the fame dragon necessarily, but really like it's just fun to talk about because it's such an iconic part of, pop culture history. Like your show, Fashion Police, and had podcasting sort of been a thing during that time. I mean, I think and social media was sort of just starting to come around.
Mhm.
Had TikTok or whatever been around during that time, I think but it obviously is clearly, all been well for you.
But like
Um
with Cato, like, and I'm not telling you what to say in your interview, but my question would be like, could you imagine being the house guest
no.
and your landlord is accused of murder? Like, take the fame away.
Yeah.
That's like crazy. It's
I
like
know.
that.
That's a good question actually. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, but it's just like take the fame part of it. It out. It was like, how do you handle that you just realized that your landlord just killed somebody? Like
That's a good question.
that's like, when you hear about stories about like roommates from hell,
Yeah.
it's like landlord from hell.
The worst case scenario that you could ever imagine. Wrong place at the right time.
Yeah, exactly.
um, I love it. Well, this book is so good, and we'll make sure we link it in our show notes. I do have one last question that I want to ask. And again, I think people would find it fascinating, just winding the clock back to the high school years, the middle school years of your
Ugh,
life. I know, same here. Where
ugh.
I get it, but I'm very curious during that time and having a mother who was in the public eye and sort of being a part of this world, was entertainment something that you were naturally attracted to? Was it just something because you knew about it and it was a part of your life that you wanted to do it? Or was it sort of resisted early on and then, you kind of maybe came to a place and go, okay, this could be something that I could be good at or want to do?
It's a really interesting question because I get asked that, and it's always sort of hard to explain. Other than just my parents always believed in having their main offices in our house.
Okay.
And yes, if they had a specific show, they had those offices as well. But their whole thing was they wanted to be home for me
I
and with
love
me
it.
while I was growing up. So basically, I lived over the shop. So it was such a part of like who I was and like not shielded from it that just became the norm. And when I went off to college, actually, I was like, ugh, I want nothing to do with it. I was going to make the big leap into, and this everyone makes fun of me because it's virtually the same thing, advertising.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
it
it's a
was
little bit different, but that's
like,
a
but
smart move.
barely, but
Yeah,
barely.
barely, but
And then,
it's not nepotism necessarily like some people might think. You're just kind of wanting to do something different. You know what I mean?
well, yeah, exactly. So I was watching, it was freshman year, second semester, and I was watching TV with someone and they were talking about some particular actress. I don't even remember which. And they're like, oh my God. Or they were looking through a magazine. Oh my God, I love her. She's so nice. And I remember thinking, oh dear God, this person is a horrible human being. And I think it was
Oh,
that very moment where I realized, I can never read a magazine, watch a TV show, watch a movie with any objectivity if I know the person at all. So I might as well just jump in.
I love it.
That's how it came to be. It wasn't, and my parents were supportive, but did not encourage me to go into the entertainment business. They're like, we will support whatever you choose to do, but we cannot encourage you to do this.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common thread for most, it seems like. And we've interviewed some amazing people on the show, including yourself, obviously. And I do ask sometimes if kids have any interest. And the common answer is, well, if they're attracted to it naturally, sure. But I'm not going to force them to be this. I don't want to be a momager or a dadager, as they say,
Mm-mm.
and have to deal with it. Well, I tell you, I appreciate your time and your graciousness. This book, again, fantastic. The podcast is available everywhere you get podcasts. And this audio version will be up for people to listen here very soon. This has been a blast. Melissa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.